Have you ever just wished you could really get a handle on a big, complex idea? Not just scratch the surface, but actually understand it and maybe do it without reading 1,000 pages.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's what we try to do here on the Deep Dive. We wade through all sorts of material articles, research, our own notes, and basically boil it down to the really important stuff for you.
The good stuff.
Exactly. And today, we're plunging into something pretty profound. Thomism. It's the whole philosophical and theological world built by Thomas Aquinas. I mean, this guy's influence is huge, stretching from way back in the Middle Ages right up to modern Catholicism. It forms the bedrock for so much Western thinking, honestly. It's quite a journey.
And our mission today really is to cut through maybe some of the perceived heaviness, We want to get you straight to the core ideas, maybe some surprising bits, drawing from a pretty comprehensive look at Thomism. Think of it like your shortcut to being genuinely clued in on something that shaped how we think about, everything reality, us, our place in it all.
And what I find really striking about Aquinas, and maybe something we should keep in mind as we talk, is this idea he had, pretty radical for the time, that truth isn't confined to one place. You can find it anywhere.
Right.
He wasn't afraid to borrow from Greek thinkers, Roman ones, Islamic philosophers, Jewish scholars. He brought it all together. It really sets the scene for exploring a system that, as you'll hear, offers this kind of foundational map for understanding existence itself.
Oh.
The cornerstones. What is Thomism?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get right into it. If someone just asks point blank, what is Thomism? Where do we even start?
Well, fundamentally, Thomism is the philosophical and theological legacy that comes from Thomas Aquinas. He was a Dominican friar, a major philosopher and theologian living around, say, 1225 to 1274.
Okay.
His big theological work, the Summa Theologica, is still just massive in Catholic philosophy and theology, absolutely central. And on the philosophy side, his commentaries on Aristotle are hugely important, along with his other writings.
And it's just staggering how foundational he became. You mentioned Pope Pius X earlier. Can you tell us a bit about that 1914 decree, Doctoris Angelici?
Yeah.
Because that sounds like a really major moment where the church basically doubled down on Aquinas.
Oh, it was huge, a massive endorsement. In that decree, Pope Pius X, he pretty much declared that you couldn't properly grasp the church's teachings without the basic philosophical framework laid out in Thomas's main points.
Wow.
He called them foundations, not just interesting opinions. Basically saying that if you mess with these core Thomistic ideas, you risk undermining the meaning of church dogma itself. It essentially cemented Thomism as the go-to philosophical system for Catholic theology for a long, long time.
That's quite something. It really puts him on a pedestal, doesn't it?
It really does. And it highlights that core principle of his, we mentioned intellectual humility, being open to truth wherever it comes from. He was what we call a realist. He genuinely believed we can know the world as it actually is, through our senses and our reason. And he had this immense respect for Aristotle. In his writings, he just calls him the philosopher.
Just the philosopher.
Yeah, that's like the ultimate hat tip, But he wasn't just Aristotle. He also skillfully wove in some Neoplatonic ideas, like the concept that everything participates in a single, primary, essential good, which, for Aquinas, is God. He saw wisdom everywhere. 2, the blueprint of reality. Thomistic metaphysics.
So if he was this incredible synthesizer, pulling ideas from all over, how does that actually play out in how Thomism sees, reality itself? Let's peel back some layers here. Let's talk metaphysics.
Right. So at the absolute base level of his ontology, his theory of what is Aquinas lays down 2 rock-solid axioms. First, the principle of non-contradiction.
Okay.
And second, the principle of causality. He basically argued that anything that doesn't violate these 2 laws could theoretically exist, even something non-physical, like, say, an angel.
So, non-contradiction and causality. They sound super basic, almost obvious. But that's the real takeaway for us. How does this thinking still sort of shape how we view what's possible, even if we're not consciously thinking Aquinas?
That's a great question. The takeaway is that for Aquinas, these aren't just like rules for logic puzzles. They're built into the fabric of reality. Non-contradiction means something can't be and not be simultaneously in the same way. Simple, right? But it means a square circle isn't just hard to picture. It's fundamentally impossible. It can't be.
Right.
And causality, that everything that begins to exist has a cause, means the universe isn't just random chaos. It's understandable. It's intelligible. These principles give us a stable framework.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, now what about how we talk about things, how we describe them? You mentioned Thomism has these 3 ways of using language: univocality, analogy, equivocation. Can you walk us through those?
Sure. So unimicality is pretty straightforward. It's when you use a word in the exact same sense. Like you said, milk earlier, cow's milk, human milk. The word milk means the same thing.
Got it.
Then there's analogy, and this one's really crucial for Aquinas. It's when a word shifts its meaning a bit, but not completely. The classic example is healthy. You can say a person is healthy. You can say food is healthy.
Right, but they aren't healthy in the same way.
Exactly. The food contributes to the person's health, so there's a relationship, a proportion. It's not identical, but it's related. This allows us to make meaningful comparisons between things that aren't exactly the same, super important later when talking about God.
Okay.
And finally, equivocation. That's when the meaning totally changes by accident, like bank, riverbank, money bank. They sound the same, mean totally different things. Using them interchangeably leads to confusion. It's a fallacy.
So analogy sounds like a really subtle but powerful tool.
Oh, absolutely. Especially, as I said, for theology. But staying with reality itself, central to Thomism is this idea of being defined simply as that which is, and he breaks this down into two parts. Quiddity.
Quiddity.
Yeah, it basically means the essence, the whatness of a thing. And esse, that's its existence, its actual reality. So anything that is basically an essence that exists.
Okay, quiddity and esse, they're a bit abstract. Can you give us a really solid example to make that stick? Like something every day.
Sure. Think about the mug on your desk. Its quiddity is everything that makes it a mug, ceramic, hollow handle meant for drinking, its definition.
Right.
But its esse is the fact that it's actually there existing on your desk right now. You could think about the idea of a mug, its quiddity all day long, but without esse, it's just a concept. It's not a real thing you can pick up.
Oh, okay. The what versus the that it is.
Exactly. And that distinction was vital for him to separate real things from just ideas. He also distinguished between things existing in themselves, substances, like you, me, a tree, and things existing in another accidents, like the color blue on the mug or its shape. Metaphysics mostly studies substances, the primary things, and that quiddity, the whatness, he said, is made of prime matter, just potential stuff and substantial form, which makes it that specific kind of thing.
This is getting deep, which leads to another fundamental question. How do things actually come into being? And do they have a purpose in this system?
Right. So Aquinas, always building on past wisdom, heavily leaned on Aristotle's four causes here. They're absolutely key to understanding change and existence in Thomism. First up, the material cause. What's it made of? For a bronze statue, it's the bronze.
Okay.
Second, the formal cause. What's its essence or design? The shape or pattern the sculptor followed for the statue.
The blueprint.
Kind of, yeah. Third, the efficient cause. Who or what made it happen? The sculptor, in this case.
The doer.
Exactly. And fourth, the final cause. What's its purpose? Why was the statue made? Maybe to honor someone or just to look nice?
Then this ties right into his famous argument against infinite regress, doesn't it? This idea that you can't have an endless chain of causes going back forever. There has to be a starting point.
A first cause or a primary mover? Yes. Something has to initiate the whole chain.
But does that first cause have to be first in time, like the Big Bang?
Not necessarily. That was actually a huge debate back then. Could the universe be eternal? Aquinas took a really interesting stance. He basically said, look, based on reason alone, you could argue either way. Whether the world had a beginning in time, he felt, was something we know from faith, from revelation, not something philosophy could definitively prove or disprove.
That's a really important split, what reason can know versus what faith tells us. Okay, but you mentioned earlier that everything has a purpose, a final cause. If everything is aiming at some good, some perfection, how does Thomism handle evil? Where does that fit?
That's the classic problem, isn't it? Following Augustine, Aquinas defined good as basically what everything naturally strives for, its fulfillment, its perfection. A good knife cuts well. That's its purpose.
Right.
Since everything created has a purpose, its very existence is a kind of good. So evil, for Aquinas, isn't a thing in itself. It's a lack, a privation of good. Privatio boni.
Like darkness is the absence of light.
Exactly like that. Blindness is the absence of sight. Evil is the absence of a good that should be there. And when people choose evil, he argued, they don't desire evil as evil. They desire something they mistakenly perceive as good for them, even if it's ultimately harmful. They're aiming at a perceived good, just badly aimed.
Which naturally brings us to maybe the most famous part of Thomism, proving God exists.
Right. Aquinas was convinced, and the Catholic Church still teaches this, that God's existence can be demonstrated through reason alone. He famously laid out his Quinque Viae, the 5 ways, in the Summa.
The 5 ways.
Yeah, 5 arguments starting from observations about the world. Motion, causality, contingency, things that don't have to exist, degrees of perfection, and the order or purpose we see in things. They all lead back, he argued, to a necessary first principle, which is God.
But he didn't think reason could explain everything about God, did he?
No, definitely not. Things like the Trinity, the Incarnation, those are mysteries of faith, revealed by God. Reason can't discover them on its own, though Aquinas insisted they can never contradict reason. And on the problem of evil, why doesn't all good God allow bad things? His answer, essentially, was that God permits evil in order to bring about a greater good, often related to free will and virtue.
So after all this metaphysics, causality, the 5 ways, what kind of picture of God do we actually get from Aquinas' rational arguments? Is it the God most people imagine, or something different?
It leads to a conception of God that's profoundly different, really, utterly transcendent. He described God as actus purus.
Pure actuality.
Pure actuality. What does that mean? Okay, think of a seed. It has the potential to be a tree, right? The fully grown tree is the actuality of that potential. For Aquinas, God is like the ultimate state of being fully actualized. There's no potential in God left to be realized. He just is fully and perfectly. His existence is his essence.
Whoa.
Yeah. And this implies a lot. God can't be physical, can't have changeable qualities or accidents. He must be simple, not made of parts. Perfect, infinite, all-powerful, all-knowing, goodness itself, love itself, everywhere, unchanging, eternal. He's the source of all being, but his causality doesn't compete with ours. He works through created causes.
So how can we even talk about a God like that, if he's so different?
That's where analogy comes back in. Aquinas stressed the analogical way. When we say God is good, our human concept of good is only an analogy for God's infinite, perfect goodness. We can know that he is, and something about what he is, but always recognizing our limited understanding. 3. The human condition. Anthropology, ethics, and knowledge.
Okay, let's bring this amazing philosophical structure down to earth a bit. Back to us. Back to you, the listener. How did Aquinas understand the human person?
Well, his basic definition is quite famous. Man is the rational animal.
Rational animal.
Yeah, we're animals sharing biological functions, but what makes us unique is reason. Our soul, in Thomism, is the substantial form of our living body. It's what makes the matter of our body a living human body.
So not like a ghost in a machine.
No, definitely not. It's the organizing principle of the body itself. Plants have a basic vegetative soul for growth. Animals have a sensitive soul for feeling and moving, but humans have an intellectual soul, which includes reason and is immortal. That's the game changer.
And the soul has different powers.
Exactly. Faculties, like basic life functions, vegetative, desires, appetite, sensing the world, sense perception, moving around, locomotive, and crucially, reason and will. He made a key distinction between the rational will, our capacity for deliberate choice, and the non-rational passions or emotions.
So, given we're these rational animals with intellectual souls, how do we live a good life? What's Thomistic ethics look like?
Well, happiness for Aquinas isn't just a feeling. It's an operation according to perfect virtue. And virtue isn't just a nice idea. It's a good habit, something you practice until it becomes part of you.
Okay, so what are the key virtues?
He talks about the 4 cardinal virtues, which he believed anyone could grasp through reason: prudence, knowing the right thing to do; temperance, moderation; justice, fairness; and fortitude, courage.
The classics.
Right. And then there are the 3 theological virtues, which are gifts from God oriented towards him: faith, hope, and charity, or love. Aquinas believed we need God's grace to consistently do good. And ultimate happiness, the beatific vision, seeing God directly, isn't fully possible in this life alone.
What about emotions? Are they good, bad?
He had a pretty balanced view. Emotions themselves aren't inherently good or bad. They're morally neutral. It depends on whether they're guided by reason and aimed at the good. Some emotions, like pity for someone's suffering, could be virtuous. Others, like envy, are inherently problematic because their object is bad.
That brings up tricky moral situations. Does Thomism just look at the rules or the consequences, or what?
It looks at both the action itself, the circumstances, and the intention. So it's not strictly rule-based like deontology, nor purely outcome-based like consequentialism. It's more nuanced.
How did that play out in practice?
A really influential idea here is the principle of double effect. Sometimes an action might have both a good intended effect and a bad foreseen but unintended side effect.
Okay.
Like, say, giving strong pain medication to a terminally ill patient. The intention is good: relieve pain. But a foreseen, unintended side effect might be that the medication slightly hastens death. The principle says this can be morally okay under certain conditions, mainly that the bad effect isn't the means to the good effect and isn't directly intended. He famously applied this to justify self-defense, even if it results in the attacker's death.
That's really practical.
It is, and it feeds into his criteria for a just war, too, needing legitimate authority, a just cause, and the right intention. It provides a framework for these tough calls.
And what about laws in society? How do they fit in?
Aquinas saw a hierarchy of law. At the top is eternal law, God's grand design for everything. Then natural law, which is our rational participation in that eternal law. He called it the light of the intellect planted in us by God, allowing us to grasp basic moral truths like the golden rule, don't do to others what you wouldn't want done to you.
So stuff we can figure out ourselves.
Exactly. Then comes human law, the specific laws societies make, which should be based on natural law. Think traffic laws. And finally, divine law, specific commands revealed by God, like the Ten Commandments, which guide us towards our ultimate supernatural end. He also noted the shift from the Old Covenant law for the Jews to the New Covenant law for everyone through Christ.
Okay, but if God has this eternal law, this grand plan, and he's guiding everything, where does free will fit in? Doesn't it sound a bit like we're just puppets?
That's a classic tension. Aquinas insisted God's providence and our free will aren't contradictory. He argued God moves everything according to its nature. He moves rocks physically, and he moves humans according to their nature, which includes free choice.
So God causes us to choose freely.
In a manner of speaking, yes. God is the ultimate cause of our freedom, not its destroyer. It's a deep mystery, how divine sovereignty and human freedom coexist. This led to huge debates later, especially between groups sometimes labeled Thomists and Molinists, about exactly how grace works with free will. The Church actually never definitively settled it, affirming both truths.
Fascinating. Okay, one last piece of the human puzzle. How do we actually know anything, according to Aquinas? What's his theory of knowledge, his epistemology?
A key starting point is the peripatetic axiom, which basically says, whatever is in our intellect must have previously been in the senses.
Nothing in the mind that wasn't first in the senses.
Pretty much. He saw the mind as having levels: sensation, taking in raw data; imagination, creating mental images or phantasms from sense data; and intellection, understanding. Our knowledge of universal concepts like dogness or triangleness isn't innate. It's abstracted by the intellect from those sensory phantasms.
So I see lots of individual dogs through my senses. My imagination stores images of them. Then my intellect somehow pulls out the universal idea of dog from all those examples. Is that the gist?
That's basically it. Your intellect grasps the common essence shared by all those particular dogs. It builds the universal concept from the particular sense experiences. And error, then, comes not usually from the senses themselves, but from making faulty judgments or reasoning incorrectly based on that sense data. It's really an early, sophisticated form of empiricism. Knowledge starts with experience. 4. Thomism through the ages. Impact, critics, and enduring legacy.
Stepping back to the bigger picture, it's clear Thomism was a game changer. It really shifted medieval thought, scholasticism, much more towards Aristotle, away from maybe a stronger Neoplatonic bent. It became massively influential, but it wasn't all smooth sailing, was it?
Oh, definitely not. Right after his death, actually, in 1277, there were condemnations in Paris and Oxford led by Bishop Dampier.
Condemnations, why?
Well, some are worried that Aquinas' embrace of Aristotle, particularly ideas about natural laws governing the universe, somehow limited God's absolute power, his omnipotence. They feared it constrained God's ability to act miraculously outside those laws. But the Dominican order, Aquinas' own order, really defended his work fiercely, and eventually, after he was canonized, made a saint in 1323, those condemnations were revoked. But yeah, there was early pushback. And later on, he faced serious challenges from William of Ockham and the whole the modern way, which had very different ideas about universals and reason.
And then jumping forward quite a bit, the modern era brought new challenges, right? Like someone like René Descartes. How did his thinking clash with Thomism?
Big time. Descartes in the 17th century really shook things up. His radical distinction between mind and body thinking substance versus extended substance was fundamentally different from Aquinas' view of the soul as the form of the body, an integrated unit.
The ghost in the machine idea again.
Kind of, yeah. And Descartes famously doubted the reliability of the senses. Remember his example from the Meditations. Looking out the window, seeing figures in hats and coats, he says he can't be sure they're men, maybe they're just automatons hidden by clothes. He concludes it's his judgment, his mind, not his senses, that tells him they're men.
So, distrust the senses. Trust pure reason.
That was his starting point, the I think, therefore I am. Very different from Aquinas's start with sensory experience. It's a fundamental shift in where you ground knowledge.
Now, someone who had a very different take on Thomism was G.K. Chesterton. What was his view? I always enjoy his perspective.
Ah, Chesterton. Yes, he famously championed Thomism as the philosophy of common sense. He loved contrasting it with modern philosophies, which, he quipped, often start with a paradox. They ask you to accept something weird up front before anything else makes sense.
Like what?
Well, his famous line was about eggs. He said something like, a Hegelian might say an egg is a hen because it's part of a process of becoming. A follower of Berkeley might say poached eggs only exist when perceived, maybe as a dream. But the Thomist, Chesterton said, knows that eggs are eggs.
I like that.
Right. His point was that Thomism trusts the basic evidence of our senses, which he saw as grounded in God's reliability. It starts with reality as we encounter it, not with some complex counterintuitive premise, eggs are eggs.
It's very grounded. But Thomism definitely had its critics over the years from different angles.
Oh, absolutely. From the Eastern Orthodox tradition, for example, there were criticisms, like from Prochorus Kydones, arguing Aquinas relied too much on pagan philosophers like Aristotle instead of exclusively on the Church Fathers. Some felt his approach over-rationalized mysteries of faith, like transubstantiation, as Vladimir Lossky argued much later.
And Protestants.
Martin Luther, for one, wasn't a fan of the scholastic method of debate associated with Thomism. He felt it often devolved into just asserting things, proof by assertion, rather than deep scriptural engagement. And of course, many modern secular philosophers, Bertrand Russell being a famous example in his History of Western Philosophy, offered sharp critiques of Aquinas' arguments, particularly the proofs for God, from a purely rationalist perspective.
It's interesting, too, that Aquinas wasn't just drawing from Christians and Greeks. He knew Jewish philosophy as well.
He did, quite profoundly. He engaged deeply with figures like Avispron and especially Maimonides. On that question of whether the world is eternal, for instance, where Aristotle seemed to lean towards eternal, Aquinas argued against it, and in doing so he explicitly drew upon reasoning found in Maimonides' Guide for the Perplexed. It just shows again how wide he cast his net for wisdom. V. Thomism today, a spectrum of interpretation.
So despite all this history, the debates, the criticisms, Thomism isn't just a museum piece. It's still a living, breathing school of thought today, right? Which is pretty amazing for something rooted in the 13th century.
It really is, and it's not monolithic either. There's a whole spectrum of modern interpretations. For instance, you have what's sometimes called existential Thomism, associated with big names like Etienne Gilson and Jacques Maritain from the mid-20th century.
Existential Thomism, what's the focus there?
They really zeroed in on Aquinas' concept of esse, that act of existence we talked about. They argued that existence itself is primary, the most fundamental reality, and we can grasp it through a kind of direct intuition of being. It shifted the focus a bit from abstract essences towards the concrete reality of existing things, including our own experience.
That definitely sounds like it connects with more modern philosophical concerns about existence and experience. What about something connecting with, say, modern science or logic?
Yeah, good question. There you've got movements like analytical Thomism, thinkers like John Haldane, Elizabeth Anscombe, Peter Geach. They basically try to bridge contemporary Anglo-American analytic philosophy with its focus on logic and language analysis with Thomistic concepts.
How does that work?
They use the rigorous tools of analytic philosophy to clarify, defend, and sometimes reformulate Thomistic arguments on metaphysics, ethics, mind, making them engage directly with current philosophical debates. It's about showing Thomism can still hold its own, logically and conceptually.
That's a really diverse landscape. You also mentioned others like a Krakow Circle and Transcendental Thomism. Briefly, what were they about?
Sure. The Krakow Circle was particularly strong in Poland between the wars. They were pioneers in integrating modern formal logic with Thomistic metaphysics, really cutting-edge stuff for its time. Transcendental Thomism, with figures like Joseph Marischal, Karl Rahner, Bernard Lonergan, took a different tack. They tried to reconcile Thomism with the modern focus on the knowing subject, influenced by Descartes and especially Kant. They asked, how is knowledge of being possible given our consciousness? It was influential, especially in theology, though some traditional Thomists felt it maybe it gave too much ground to modern assumptions.
And there was Carol Wojtyla's approach, too, Pope John Paul II.
Yes, a Lublin Thomism or phenomenological Thomism. Wojtyla combined Thomism with insights from phenomenology, focusing on lived experience, and personalism, emphasizing the dignity of the person. It put the human person and their experience right at the center, while still rooted in Thomistic metaphysics. So you see, Thomism keeps evolving and engaging.
It really does. Now, to kind of anchor these core ideas again, let's quickly revisit those 24 Thomistic theses from Pius X. You said they were like a distillation.
Exactly. Think of them as Pope Pius X in 1914 saying, "Okay, everyone, here are 24 key points that reliably capture Aquinas' core philosophy. Study these." They weren't new doctrines, but signposts to the essentials.
So what kind of things did they emphasize? Give us a couple of examples.
Sure. In ontology, theory of being, they reiterated things like potency and act being the fundamental principles of all created things, the crucial real distinction between a thing's essence, what it is, and its existence, that it is, except in God, where they are identical. Also, the difference between substances, things existing in themselves, and accidents, qualities existing in substances.
Basic building blocks.
Right. In cosmology, they stress that physical things are composed of matter and form, and that it's quantity or matter that makes one individual distinct from another of the same kind. In psychology, they affirmed the human soul as the single substantial form of the body, directly created by God, naturally incorruptible and immortal. And importantly, that our intellect gets its knowledge by abstracting concepts from the sense images, that empirical starting point again.
And about God.
They reaffirmed that God's existence can be demonstrated a posteriori from effects back to cause via the five ways, that God's essence is his existence. He is ipsum esse subsistens, subsistent being itself, pure actuality, infinite, perfect, and the sole creator of the world. It's a really concise roadmap to the heart of Thomistic thought. Outro.
Well, we've definitely taken a deep dive today. From Aquinas' own time, wrestling with Aristotle and Revelation, all the way to these diverse modern schools still engaging with his ideas. I think you, listening, should now have a really solid grasp of how Thomas Aquinas shaped thinking about reality, humanity, ethics, how we know things, and maybe why he's still so relevant.
Absolutely. Thomism, as we've hopefully shown, offers this incredibly coherent and, well, comprehensive way of looking at the world. It tries to integrate faith and reason, providing these robust frameworks for thinking about everything from, the nature of a coffee mug to the existence of God and the complexities of free will. It really does encourage that deep critical thinking, kind of like what we aim for in these deep dives.
So as you mull this over, what really stood out to you from everything we discussed? How might thinking about Aquinas' ideas, maybe that idea of purpose or causality, or even just Chesterton's eggs are eggs, how might that change how you look at the world around you?
And maybe a final thought to leave you with. In our age, just drowning in information, constantly shifting trends, how does a system like Thomism, born over 700 years ago, still offer tools that feel relevant? How might these ancient ideas about first principles, purpose, and the nature of reality still challenge or maybe even illuminate our contemporary questions in ways we might not expect? Something to think about.